So tonight we are going to find your park. We're going to explore America's lesser known national parks. And I will kind of talk about what I mean by lesser known parks in just a bit. So before I do that, just a little introduction about me. So my name is Krista Muscarella. Thank you all for joining and finding this. A lot of familiar faces and a few strangers, so this is great. I was born and raised in Buffalo, of course, go Bills, and I moved to Los Angeles in July of 2012 in between undergrad and grad school. I came out, I live in Los Angeles currently. I came out to do an AmeriCorps program originally, and I stayed for about 10 months, basically doing a year of service, working in an under-resourced school. And then I ended up moving back to Buffalo for graduate school, but I got home and I had my first winter, and my first winter back with all the snow and the cold and having to scrape my car off and wait for it to warm up and all of that fun stuff. And I made the determination that I'm pretty determined to get back to Los Angeles. So after grad school, I only interviewed out here in Los Angeles, and I came back in July of 2016, where I have been here ever since. Let me see. So in moving, I did a lot of cross-country road trips, and the very first national park that I went to, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, is my dad and I at the Grand Canyon on that first drive across the country. And then my cousin and I drove back to Buffalo, and we hit some national parks. And then the third time across the country, no national parks because my wonderful cat was with me, and we were on a mission to get out here. But I just saw the differences in all of the national parks. So my first one was the Grand Canyon, and then shortly after that was the Yosemite, and just seeing the beautiful Yosemite Valley. Just every park is so different, and they're all so great. So hopefully you'll feel the same after I touch upon only 5 tonight. But let's see. So many people also wonder, how do you travel so much? I do have a job, contrary to popular belief. I'm a school psychologist, and one of the perks for that is that I follow the schedule of the students. So we have a lot of time off on winter break. We have time off Thanksgiving, spring break, summer break, and I've taken some fairly ambitious trips over the weekend as well. And so as of this past November, I have visited 43 of the national parks here in the United States. This is my reminder to do a quick poll. I would like to see how many national parks you guys have been to, and there is an option for what's a national park, and that's okay if you select that one, because we're going to go through it, and I'll talk about the different designations before we go exploring some parks. So I'll just share this for a minute or so, and then we'll move on. Cool. All right, couple more seconds. Cool. All right, I think that's enough. So looks like we have some national park newbies here, which is fantastic. I'm not sure if Scott is in attendance, but I know he has been. Oh wait, let me share the results. There we go. All right. New feature here, first time. So a lot of national park newbies. Not sure if Scott is here. He has been to every park, every unit in the national park system. So I'm very jealous of him. Yeah, so let's go on. I shared the results. Here we go. Oh boy. Okay, so a brief history of the National Park Service. In 1872, Yellowstone National Park became the world's first true national park. And then about 20, 30 years later, my favorite president, Theodore Roosevelt, signed the Antiquities Act, which made a quarter of all of the current national park units were in that Antiquities Act. So 10 years later, President Woodrow Wilson, he signed another act which created the National Park Service. And this was super important because, you know, all of these different units were now a thing, but there was nobody overseeing them. There was no unified leadership or organization to operate them. And because of that, the parks were very vulnerable to the competing interests. You know, just think about it now with people wanting to drill and take the resources that these parks protect. And as of 2019, the National Park System expanded to 419 units. But of those units, only 62 of those are designated as national parks. So there's a lot of different legislation that goes through and how a park becomes a national park. Sometimes they start out as national monuments. So of those 419, 62 are national parks, and there's a number of like national historic sites, national monuments, national seashores, national recreation areas. So my goal, rather ambitious, is not to go to all 419 of the units, but only to go to 62 of them. And this map here shows the 62. So if you guys were able to figure out the annotate feature, I would love for you to find the stamp option. And we have like stars and we have hearts. And if you could just like pick a park that might be your favorite, or pick a park that you want to go to and put a little stamp near it. Yes, and you can draw too. If you're on a phone, you don't have the stamp features, so feel free to draw. This purple one wants to go everywhere. Oh my gosh, the chat is hilarious. Hi, Mom. All right. So it looks like Hawaii is pretty popular. Alaska, everyone wants to go there. Luckily, I'll take you to 2 parks tonight. Cool. All right. Finishing touches. Awesome. I'm going to save our artwork here. I'm going to clear us out, and we're going to keep on going. Okay. Nope. Oh boy. Clear off drawings. Okay. All right. So now to get into what I mean by lesser known or least visited. But before we get there, I want to talk about the parks that are the most popular. So over 327 million people visited the 419 national park units last year. So what that looks like to be determined. You know, they just might have driven through, they might not have stayed the night. And so there's a little debate there. And then the national parks, those 62 national parks, nearly 90 million people visited those parks last year. So the big ones that you might think of when you think of a national park, you know, Yosemite, Great Smoky. That's my father, who is just drawing all over everything. That's fine. Okay, cool. So the most popular ones you might think of: the Rocky Mountain, the Great Smokies, that spans multiple states. Zion has become quite popular the past few years or so. Yosemite, Yellowstone, so on and so forth. So of these 10 parks on here, I have been to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've only been to 6 of these parks because my approach has been to visit the lesser known parks first. I'm kind of going in a non-traditional order. I have made it a mission to go to more of the hard to reach ones first and then circle back and get the easier ones. So on the contrary, the 10 least visited parks. I mean, not the very least visited park, Gates of the Arctic National Park, only 10,518 visitors last year. So you can look at the states here: Alaska, American Samoa in the middle of an ocean. Isle Royale is a small island off Michigan. So they're just a bit more hard to reach, a bit more remote. I mean, I say a bit quite loosely. They're very hard to visit. And so with that being said, they're also very expensive. So I would like to preface this whole presentation with, I do have a job. I work very hard at the job, and I do as much overtime as they'll allow me to do. This past summer, my dad and I went to Alaska with the intention of visiting all 8 of the national parks that are up there. It was very expensive. A lot of people think like, oh, you went with your dad. How nice. He paid for you. No, I'm really thankful he went because we were able to split things 50-50. But in an effort to make that trip happen, I worked a lot of overtime. I drove for Uber, and I did Postmates. I was delivering food. And I saved. And there's a lot of strategies that I'm going to talk about that helped us save money on the trip. You know, we did a lot of stuff that was very expensive, but we also cut some corners, which was really helpful. So without further ado, let's go and check out our first national park. So we're Los Angeles to Alaska. Let's see. All right. Wrangell-St. Elias National Park is one of the 8 in Alaska. It is the largest national park in the system. It is the size of Yellowstone, Yosemite, a small country, Switzerland, all combined, or 6 Yellowstones. So needless to say, it's quite large. It is, so of the 8 national parks in Alaska, only 3 are accessible by road. This happens to be one that is accessible by road. I mentioned it's huge, and I'm going to talk first about the Slana region of the park, which is the Nabesna Road, and then we're going to go all the way down here, and we're going to talk about the McCarthy Road, which leads to the areas of McCarthy and Kennecott. So, my computer, here we go. All right, so first up, the Nabesna Road. So this was actually my second time visiting this park, and both times I went there from Denali. And the first time I visited this park, I only saw this area, the Nabesna-Slana region. And so it's a 6-hour drive from Denali. Always make sure for all of these parks that your first stop are the ranger stations, because I don't know if there's any park rangers on this call, but I love you guys. You are a wealth of knowledge. They're able to tell you about the road conditions. They can tell you good hikes to do. They can give you the junior ranger book. The visitor centers are where I get my stamp for my little national park book. So stop at the ranger station, especially on at this park, because this Nabesna Road is all primarily gravel. There's 3 stream crossings that I'll talk a little bit about, and so you do want to know the road conditions. It's 42 miles one way to the end, which is the Rambler Mine Trail. All right. So what is there to do in this area of the park? My first hidden secret or hidden gem are the public use cabins. So I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, but there are a variety of accommodations. The public use cabins, the campground, which is owned by the National Park Service, and then more private things that you can reserve via Airbnb or the website. So I do want to give a shout out to the Sportsman's Paradise Lodge. And there's a variety of things to do, just ranging from relaxing, exploring, trying to cross creeks, and hiking. You have to cross those creeks to get hiking. So my hidden gem, the Nabesna Road and the public use cabins. So the state of Alaska has a variety of public use cabins, and it's a hidden gem because they're actually free to reserve. It's first come, first serve. You can make reservations up to 6 months in advance. And so the first time I came to this national park, I was able to stay at this Viking Lodge cabin for free for a couple of nights. And there's no running water or electricity, but it was still awesome because it was truly, I felt, an Alaskan experience being able to stay in a remote cabin in Alaska. And then this is another one, the Caribou Creek cabin, which my dad and I stayed at this past July. I was really hoping to get the Viking Lodge cabin for him because that's only like 0.3 of a mile hike. And the Caribou Creek cabin requires more of a 1.5 mile hike, which wouldn't have been bad if we didn't spend the day exploring the park before actually starting the hike up to the cabin. So you live and you learn. It's always an adventure. We hiked up, finally found it, and it was completely worth it because that whole relaxing that I talked about, this was us having breakfast one morning on the patio of this cabin. And so just beautiful views, very relaxing. Another thing I talked about was going on a hike, and the creeks that you need to cross to get to the hike I really so desperately wanted to show my dad. The Rambler Mine Trail required 3 creek crossings, and one way to save money, of course, is to get a super cheap rental car, but that won't allow you to cross these creeks. So I was very determined. It's kind of a common theme here with these parks, determination and getting to them and completing the goal. And so I was like, Dad, there's got to be another way. And so I had made contact with the Sportsman Paradise Lodge prior to the trip because I wanted to see if they were open for potentially like dinner one night. And so I said, maybe like they would let us borrow a 4-wheeler or something. And well, so we stopped in and we inquired with that very interesting question, and the owners, Victoria, she said that if we come back the following morning, then she would actually drive us to the end of the road. And so the next morning we went back, and Victoria loaded up the car with her 2 kids and her 2 dogs, and she drove this massive pickup truck right over the creeks like it was no big deal, and we were able to get to the end of the road. And yes, she did come back later that afternoon and pick us up, and it was just kind of, again, like the whole idea of Alaska and the people being so nice and so friendly, like very true, at least for the Sportsman's Paradise Lodge. So what did I want to get to the end of the road for so bad? I wanted to do this Rambler Mine hike. Obviously, just our luck, it's always an adventure, and we get to the top of the Rambler Mine and it's pouring rain. But eventually it subsided after we had lunch and we were able to explore the old mine. And then when we came back down and we were waiting for Victoria to pick us back up, oh, what do you know? It started pouring rain again, and we were able to construct this little shelter out of these random barrels and a piece of plywood. But these are the memories that are so important to me. And we have a saying that it's always an adventure when we go with my dad, and the whole Alaska trip held true to that. So some hiking. I will mention that I'd love to go back yet again and do the Skookum Volcano Trail, in addition to maybe some backcountry camping. So another thing about the visitor centers, those are your tickets to backcountry permits. A lot of visitors, well, some visitor centers, depending on where you're going, actually will rent out bear canisters. So always stop in those visitor centers. All right, so we have now driven 3 hours from the beginning of the Nebesna Road to the beginning of the McCarthy Road. You can stop at the Copper Center Visitor Center along the way. It's about halfway. And so the McCarthy Road, it originated in 1909 as a railway to support the Kennecott copper mines, which is pretty much the major attraction at the end of this road. So you're going to drive 2 hours, nice and slow, and even slower when you're passing other vehicles, because your windshield could potentially break. Ours didn't, thank you. But a lot of rental car companies don't want you to drive the rental cars on this road for those reasons. I mean, it's an old railway road, so they say that there could potentially be like rail ties sticking up. So just be cautious while you're driving. And also be cautious because one of the more nerve-wracking aspects of this road is this 1-lane bridge that is 238 feet in the air. And yeah, it's a little scary. But eventually you get down the road, you see this trestle, you see beautiful sights, scenic sights, you see maybe an eagle eating something, and all of a sudden, 60 miles down the road, boom, you just end at this random footbridge. And you have to park your car, and then you walk across the footbridge. This is known as the McCarthy Footbridge, and this is almost like the ticket to the towns of McCarthy and Kennecott. So cross the footbridge, and there's a couple different options here because you're still about a half a mile from the town of McCarthy and about 4 or 5 miles from the town of Kennecott. I use the term town rather loosely, but anyways, any type of civilization. So so my dad and I had just come from staying at that public use cabin with no running water, aka no showers. So my original plan was to stay at the free campground run by the National Park Service, Jumbo Creek, but that was at least 5.5, 6.5 miles from the end of that footbridge. And this Alaska Tour Saver book, you can buy online, just Google that, and there was a coupon for buy one night, get one night free at the Kennecott Glacier Lodge. So yes, we splurged a little bit for hot showers, warm bed, and the Kennecott Glacier Lodge has a shuttle that'll pick you up at the end of the footbridge, take you to the lodge. Yes, we showered, and we were lucky enough to get a ride back and get dropped off in McCarthy when they were on their way to pick up more people at the footbridge. So there are other shuttle options, but this one worked out really nice for us. And then while I'm talking about saving a little bit of money for a very expensive trip, even just locally, if you're going to visit national parks, I would really recommend getting the America the Beautiful annual pass. So the going rate is $80 for the year if you're just like a regular person. And I think it pays for itself year in and year out because if you think about the admission price to say Yosemite or Joshua Tree, it's like $25 per car. And so you could visit just a couple times or a couple different national parks, and it truly pays for itself. And then I said $80 if you're like a regular person. I shouldn't say that. It's just like for individuals, but there's also a senior citizen pass at a discounted rate. There's a volunteer pass. If you volunteer with the Park Service and accumulate a certain number of numbers, you can get a discounted or free annual pass. If you have a disability, there is a discounted annual pass. And then if you know any fourth graders, they actually can get a free annual pass for the year. You just have to be in fourth grade. So that's great. All right, so some other things to do. The Kennecott Mines National Historic Landmark. Oh, this is us having breakfast at the Kennecott Glacier Lodge, overlooking the Root Glacier here. So really nice, great location. This is some scenes from exhibits from the Kennecott Mines National Historic Landmark. Here's the sign for the landmark, and then my dad looking at some fake soup cans. It's really nice how they kind of restored things. And then in the middle is the Kennecott Mill town, the Kennecott Mill. It's a concentration mill, 14 stories. And so again, with this Alaska Tour Saver book, we were able to do a buy one, get one free tour with St. Elias Alpine Guides. And we were actually able to go into this 14-story concentration mine. We hiked up a little bit, and then we started at the top and we went down level by level with a guide, and we were able to really see and kind of picture what life would have been like living in this mining town. So it's really neat. And then again, with the Alaska Tour Saver book, we were able to get a buy one, get one for the Root Glacier with Raft the Wrangell-St. So we took a tour, we hiked a little bit near the waterfall. That was us hiking to the glacier. And then we were able to strap on crampons and actually go hiking, walking around on Root Glacier, which was really neat. I filled up my water bottle with fresh glacial water, and my dad exclaimed, "I'm walking on a big ice cube," and that was really neat. So, yeah. All right. So I think that is it for Wrangell-St. Elias. That one gets the most time because it's the biggest. So, oh, no. Where are we off to next? So from Alaska, we're going to cross the country and head to the very warm state of Florida to go to Dry Tortugas National Park. So Dry Tortugas is 70 miles west off the coast of Key West. So it is, and as on par, a bit harder to get to. It's a pretty large park, but less than 1% of it is actually dry ground. So obviously the park is mostly water. There are 7 small islands, 3 of which are open to the public. And there's a couple different options for getting there. Hopefully you're able to do the one you would like. You can bring your own boat, you can charter a boat, you can take the ferry that's run through the park. The park concessionaire is the Yankee Freedom. You can do a seaplane, or you can, if you have a seaplane, you can take your private seaplane there. Our original plan was to take the park concessionaire Yankee Freedom ferry. And we were going to camp there, and it was going to be a fabulous time, except then things didn't quite go as planned. We were not able to take the ferry because we got stuck. I mean, this is first world problems. We got stuck in Peru when our flight from Cusco to Lima got canceled, and we were stuck in Cusco for a day, so we missed our flight back to Fort Lauderdale, was where our layover was going to be before we actually went home. And so we were going to visit the 3 national parks in Florida. So everything was delayed by a day. I don't waste any time. So naturally, the very next morning, we were supposed to hop on the ferry, which didn't happen. So here we are spending way too much money on a seaplane because my whole determination really just got the best of me. And I decided that, you know, we had to get there. So seaplane it was. Awesome views, way too expensive. We ended up doing just the half day option. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have camped there. So what did I, what's going on here? Okay, so what did we do? Dry Tortugas is mostly known for the magnificent Fort Jefferson. So it's the nation's largest 19th century fort. With that being said, it's the largest brick masonry structure in the Americas, and it's composed of over 16 million bricks. So that in of itself is worth seeing. And not to mention the fact that it's Florida and you're 70 miles off the coast of Florida, so the waters are especially blue. You can go snorkeling and see the marine life and all of the corals. The assortment of bird life, if you're a birder. I aspire to be a birder someday. A lot of different options. So here is Fort Jefferson and those 16 million bricks. 16 million bricks that it's made of. Never thought that I would be wearing a little sundress in a national park, but when you go in mid-July, you just wear as little as possible because it's so hot and humid. These are the picturesque blue waters I was referring to. So we were able to go swimming even though we were only there for a short period of time. We did go snorkeling. And we were able to experience the island before the ferry came with over 100 people. So it was really cool to just be the only ones there for a little while. And then just further enforcing why I want to go back and camp someday. So pretty cool. All right. Small park, little time. So from Dry Tortugas, we go to King Salmon for debatably my favorite national park. So Katmai National Park and Preserve, you may know this park from the iconic bear photos of a bear on a waterfall with a salmon just jumping into its mouth. But this park was actually originally established to protect areas surrounding a very, very, very large volcanic eruption in the area now known as the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. So first established to protect that, but now today it protects 9,000 years of the human history, a very important habitat for salmon, thousands of brown bears. The park is a reasonable size. It's the size of Connecticut and New Jersey combined, but there are some specific areas that people frequent because this is one of the national parks that is not accessible by road. So Brooks Camp is by far the most visited, and followed by the Valley of 10,000 Smokes and Halo Bay. So I'm going to talk about Brooks Camp and the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. So most people will take from King Salmon, so maybe they'll fly Anchorage to King Salmon, and then they'll take a 20-minute float plane to what's called Brooks Camp or Brooks Lodge. And you can do a couple different things here in this area. You could do a flight seeing tour and just fly over and see the bears. You could do a day trip, you know, get dropped off in the morning and then in the afternoon go back to Anchorage perhaps. Or what I would definitely recommend is staying for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 nights. And I'll talk about why I would recommend staying more nights than less. So Brooks Lodge is actual shelter structure. It's a lodge. Brooks Camp is the national park campground that you can stay at. It's not free, but it's a heck of a lot cheaper than Brooks Lodge. So the current pricing for Brooks Camp is $12 a person a night for the peak season. Whereas the lodge is easily at least a couple $100s a night. And one of the good things, if you want to rough it in the campground, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that it's actually enclosed by an electric fence because of the thousands of bears I was just referring to. But the campers can actually use the shower facilities at the lodge. You can warm up around the camp, not campfire, but there's an indoor fire in the lodge. You can go to and warm up if it rains, you know. You can eat at the lodge. So I don't know, rough it in the campground and go get the amenities in Brooks Lodge. And then if you're really daring and you don't want or need the protection of the electric fence, sure, go and camp in the backcountry. One of the reasons why people may camp in the backcountry is because they don't make their reservations far enough in advance. So the peak season for when the salmon are really running up the waterfall are July and September. And the reservations for this year actually were released January 5th. So you need to make your reservations nearly a year in advance and plan accordingly. And you got to be on it at that day, at that time, because for peak season, they sell out like that. If you've ever used recreation.gov, you know things are there 1 minute and they're gone the next. And a funny story, it's not funny, when the government shut down the year that so last January, there was a partial government shutdown, so the permits were delayed, and they finally said, okay, they're going to be available in like March or April, and lo and behold, that particular day, I was to be in Joshua Tree, helping to teach an outdoor program. So here I am, like frantically in the Starbucks in 29 Palms near Joshua Tree, like frantically clicking, hoping everything goes, shaking, and I get the permits and I call my dad and I'm like, we got him, and he has no idea what I'm talking about, but hopefully he'll say that it was worth, you know, that it was a trip of a lifetime. We were able to get the permits and stay at Brooks Camp and see the bears. Whew. So staying the longer the better. The bears are amazing. There are multiple ranger programs per day, and I'll talk a little bit about the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. That'll really be a day trip all of in itself. So this is a bit closer look at the electric fence for the campground. We have the float plane that you'll need to take from King Salmon to this area, Brooks Camp, and we did things a little unconventionally, although if you are looking to save money I should say, if you're looking to visit all 8 national parks and you want to save a little bit of money, although it's still expensive. So we were at Lake Clark National Park, and so most people will probably go Lake Clark back to Anchorage to King Salmon. But we were able to charter this flight from Lake and Penn Air, and they were able to pick us up in the Port Ellsworth area of Lake Clark and take us to King Salmon. So we kind of skipped a step, which actually did save a little bit of money. And it brought me great joy when my dad was like, oh, Krista, like every plane we get on keeps getting smaller and smaller. So we made it, we got there, and what did we see? Oh, but before we were able to see the bears, the real great hundreds of bears, everyone who goes to Brooks Lodge, Brooks Camp, the Brooks area, has to go to bear school. So here we are in bear school, and we're all excited. We watched the video, we had our questions answered, we got our little pin to signify that we were at bear school. We were graduates. My dad stuck his on his hat, I stuck mine on my shirt. We're all proud. We're gonna walk our stuff to the campground. And then my dad is pushing the cart and he says, Krista, there's a bear on the trail. And I was like, no, there's not. And then he starts backing up, and yes, there was a bear on the trail. We stuck a little bit of refuge on the beach area, and the bear, as you can see here, he just looks at our stuff and just keeps on walking. So the bears here in Katmai, I mean, don't quote me, but they are much more interested in the salmon than they are eating the humans. Like, we had food in our packs, and he just walked right on by. They want the salmon. So it's just very funny. That was our first of many bear encounters, and the long-awaited bear photos. Lots of bears eating the salmon. Here's my attempt at one of the iconic shots with the bears having the salmon in their mouth, the bear cubs. I loved it. Just checking the chat quickly as you admire all of the bear photos. And so this is, actually, I think it shows in a second. Okay, so this is what's known as Brooks Falls. And so there are many bears here waiting for the salmon. And this is one of several reasons why I would recommend having more than 1 or 2 nights, because when we arrived, it was very, very, very warm, unseasonably hot, and so the salmon were not running. They were hanging out in Knack Knack Lake, waiting for cooler weather, waiting to swim up and try to jump. It was very warm. Yes, yes, it was. Oh no. Yeah, I need to not look at the chat. Okay, so it was very warm and the fish were not swimming. So the bears were just hanging out. And so luckily we stayed a couple of nights, and the one night it ended up raining, and therefore it cooled off the water. And then the salmon were swimming and jumping, and there were more salmon than I could possibly count jumping at one time, trying to make it up the waterfall to keep on swimming. And it was just really incredible because the bears are here waiting for the fish. And then we went back to camp, we slept, and the next morning we go back and it literally looked like maybe a scene out of The Hangover 3. There were just salmon carcasses all over the place. So the bears had a feast of epic proportions. And even though they were quite full and all went to sleep it off for a while, they did end up coming back, and we were able to see them catch the salmon in their mouths and really go fishing. And I'll have some more pictures of that shortly. But before I do that, we did, in that meantime of waiting for the weather to cool down, we did do the day trip to the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, which is about an hour and a half away from the Brooks Lodge area. It is a separate day trip through the park concessionaire, so there is a added fee to that. I thought it was really worth it. Not many people get out of Brooks Camp to really see the park and experience all of it. So it was awesome. This volcano, it erupted in 1912, and it was the largest volcanic eruption in North America. So it erupted for nearly 60 hours, and it sent ash as high as 20 miles in the air. And one of the exhibits that was in the visitor center in this area of the park said it like spewed, that ash flew as far as like the Seattle area. So it was just really cool. The picture here, this is all volcanic ash built up, and there's my dad and I at a volcano. And it was a really, really neat experience. And then we had one more day to see some more bears, and the bear cubs. And there's in the middle there is a picture of the fish, the salmon actually jumping and swimming and making their attempt up the waterfall and right into the bear's mouth. So, so great. Such a great park. All right. So Katmai, one of my favorites. So from Katmai, we're gonna go to the middle of the South Pacific Ocean to the National Park of American Samoa. So did you know that there's a national park, a United States National Park in the heart of the South Pacific Ocean? If you read the description, you would have known, but yes, it's true. There is a national park that far down in the South Pacific Ocean, that far away from the United States. It's actually, I wrote this down, 4,795 miles away, I believe, from Los Angeles. So yeah, it's out there. And the park protects the rich culture of the very welcoming American Samoa people, the natural resources. I'm going to show some pictures of the rainforest and all of the Pacific Island scenery. We did a little bit of snorkeling. I think I might have a photo of that. So here we go. The National Park of American Samoa. So American Samoa is made up of a couple different islands, and there's kind of pockets of the national park on just about every island. So Hawaiian Airlines is the only airline that'll fly from the United States to American Samoa. You have to have a layover on the island of Oahu. So little tip, you could book a multi-city trip. So I flew LAX to Oahu and then Oahu to Pungo Pungo. And we actually did a multi-city trip, and we spent a couple days in Honolulu. So free trip to Honolulu because we had to have a layover there regardless. There's a couple different options for accommodations. We ended up staying at Sadie's by the Sea. It's a hotel on the main island, and then Viato Lodge on a much smaller, more remote island of Ofu. The homestay program, that's something that I wanted to do, but just the communication of trying to reach people in American Samoa is very difficult. I think that the National Park Service may have streamlined that a little bit better at this time, but we just weren't able to make that connection, so we didn't do the homestay program, but we were still able to have experiences with the people of American Samoa, which was fantastic. In terms of transportation, you can do a rental car. We did that option just because we wanted to be able to have very reliable transportation and a schedule, and got to pack those days action-packed. So our rental car was through Avis. We didn't do taxis, but taxis are an option, and then buses. So here's our flight of Hawaiian Airlines, and then Sadie's by the Sea was the hotel that we stayed at. Whew. And I talked about those island scenes and the tropical scenery. These were fairly short. I mean, the three that doesn't look like you're going to die on the ladder were very, very short hikes. And then to get to these awesome, awesome views. I did not swim in that tide pool because I was too scared that I would die and my mom would be very upset, but I really wanted to swim in that tide pool. And yeah, so just incredible hikes. Another, always an adventure. So we landed on Pungo Pungo on very late Thursday. Friday at 5 p.m. was the partial government shutdown was going into place. So I was determined to get to this visitor center to get my stamp, to turn in my junior ranger book and get my junior ranger badge. And we definitely interrupted their meeting about the government shutdown, but they were just so nice and just so great. So I'm going to talk about Peter in the blue shortly. Also, shout out to my friends, Krista and Jeremy, who are here. Thank you. great travel buddies, crazy enough to fly to the middle of the South Pacific Ocean with me. So Peter, all right. So Peter lives on the island of Anu'u, and we wanted to go to this island, and we told the front desk of the Sadie's by the Sea that we wanted to go there, and they were like, oh, have you talked to Peter? And we didn't know who this Peter person was, but we were at the visitor center, and they also said, oh, have you talked to Peter? And we're like, who's Peter? So they got in touch with Peter, who happened to be at the post office down the road, and Peter came and he met us, and we were able to connect with him for the following day to take this sketchy little boat out to the island of Anu'u, 45 minutes max on that little boat. And so here's Peter and us as we arrived in the top right, and then he had a Ava ceremony for us, which is like a welcoming ceremony. We were able to do a cultural activity, several. We weaved, not baskets, but we weaved plates. We were able to shuck coconuts. Shuck? I'm not sure. Yeah, we shuck coconuts, much harder than it looks. And I so hilariously asked Peter, why do you live on Anu'u? Why don't you live on the main island, the bigger island? And this picture in the bottom right, he said, oh, just wait till you get to my house, you'll see. And that's his front yard. So that's why Peter lives where he lives, on the island of Anu'u. He took us on a hike around the island, and this picture always makes me laugh because we got to the end of the hike and he said, I have to take your picture here. And we're like, okay. And he said, that way everyone will know you were on Anu'u. You can look at this picture, no one would know we were there. But just great memories, and best birthday ever, because we did this on my birthday and it was fantastic. All right, and then we went over, I know we're getting a little bit short on time, so we hopped over to the island of Ofu. We had to fly from Pungo Pungo to another island, to Au, and then we had to take this really sketchy boat. It wouldn't have been sketchy if we weren't in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, like in open waters. It was very scary for me, but we made it. We spent Christmas here. We went snorkeling. We saw a performance at the church, which was an experience all in of itself. I do mention that we spent Christmas here because, well, I felt bad, and my mom was like, why aren't you coming home for Christmas? And then I sent her this picture of us on the beach living our best lives, and that was on Christmas. And then she said, oh, okay, I understand. This was a hike on the island of Ofu. So we started, this is the trailhead, nice and clear. We get up here and it was just like, oh wow, we hiked all the way up here and we're in a cloud. But we had our lunch, we waited, we were patient. We waited some more, and then we waited a little bit more, and the view cleared, and it was so worth it to see the two islands and just overlook the ocean like that. So only a couple minutes left. We're gonna go to American Samoa and then back to Los Angeles. And I said with careful research, you too can find your park. So typically I give this presentation in the Los Angeles area. So we like to find a park in LA or in California. The state of California actually happens to be the state with the most national parks. There are 9, and one that is a little bit less visited is Channel Islands National Park. So it's the 46th least visited. In between the bottom 10 that I showed and the 46th, Pinnacles actually ranks lower, but Channel Islands is beautiful, and there are a lot of options here. So it's about an hour drive to Ventura to hop aboard the ferry to one of the 5 islands. The park preserves a lot of natural and cultural resources. The Chumash people resided on these islands way back in the day. So it's an incredible thing to go to these islands just like an hour in a ferry ride away from Los Angeles, and think about what Los Angeles, a really big prosperous, like incredible city, all built up in what California used to be like. So I talked about the ferry. You can also take a small plane or a boat there. I always do the park concessionaire ferry, Island Packers. And then once you get there, you are on your own 2 feet. There are no hotels. There's roads that only the National Park Service vehicles can go on. So there's one established campground on each island. I've stayed at Santa Cruz and Santa Rosa, and then I did a day trip to Anacapa. And there's a lot of different things you can do at this park as well, primarily hiking. You can go swimming, lots of exploring, great photography options. And again, I gotta be a birder someday, so I can become really appreciate all of the birds. So these are some photos from Santa Rosa Island. This was the campground. We did a trip over Labor Day weekend, and we were able to explore, see the island foxes, see the coastal views, watch an incredible sunset. Anacapa was the day trip, so we just came out for the day. It's a much smaller island, still incredible views. Must have been a Sunday wearing my Bill shirt. The arch is one of the most iconic things that Channel Islands is known for, that arch there. And then this is Santa Cruz. We did another camping trip, possibly in April, I don't remember, but I love the island foxes. You can kayak. There's another concessionaire of sorts where you can rent kayaks from, and again, hiking these iconic coastal views. So I rushed a little bit at the end so I can hopefully answer some questions briefly. And so we're a little short on time, but I'd love to talk more, and I'm going to do a virtual happy hour to talk travel, adventures, and parks next week, Tuesday. So if you signed up on my blog, you can also RSVP there for the virtual happy hour. You can grab a drink and we can talk travel, adventures, and parks. So, any questions at all? A lot of questions in the chat, I think. So, oh, my favorite national park in the 48 states. It's so hard. I feel like that is one of the toughest questions. It's one that I ask other people, but it's so hard to answer because every park offers something different. I mean, Yosemite is great without all the people. Just like I had the opportunity to hike Half Dome, which was an amazing experience. Zion is incredible without all the people, to do Angel's Landing and the Narrows. I thought that Lassen Volcanic National Park in Northern California is really underrated. Crater Lake is incredible. So that wasn't just one park, but they're all great. The Grand Canyon, again, without all the people, if you can really get down into the canyon and maybe, so hike down, potentially do rim to rim, that actually might be my favorite. And I'm really bummed because coronavirus canceled 2 trips to the Grand Canyon. So yeah. Any other questions? You guys can unmute yourselves if you have a question. Why didn't I pack you into my luggage for American Samoa? Because I barely had enough room for my stuff. Yeah. Is there a question? Just chatter. Okay. All right. Well, I would have to really scroll up. Oh, most unexpected experience in the parks to date. I think that having a time crunch in the Grand Canyon to do rim to rim. So we started on the south rim, and then we went up, we hiked down, we camped for the night, and then we had to hike back up to the north rim. And we were on a time crunch because we were taking the shuttle back to the south rim, and I really had to be at work the following day, Monday morning. So just getting to the north rim in time and like not knowing what to expect, hiking up to the north rim was a bit stressful, but All right, I have actual questions now. Once I visit all the national parks, which one will you revisit? All of them. Oh, you know, probably the ones that I wasn't able to spend as much time as I would have liked to in them. So Lassen Volcanic would be pretty high on the list. We were able to see one area of the park, but there's another area with like this dome or cone or something that I wasn't able to see. So I've now taken the approach to spend more time at each park rather than trying to rush and get them done. So I have to like go back and look at my list, but Lassen Volcano seems to be up there. Favorite park in the 40. Where is Bentley? I'll just wiggle the treats. He'll come soon. Have I ever gone alone? Yeah, I went to Virgin Islands National Park by myself, which was not scary, but it was a little bit funny because, like, you know, there were just a bunch of couples there. It's like a very island place. Here's Bentley to answer that question. And so, yeah, I just kind of went to the Virgin Islands on a complete whim. I had like a Monday off and went. So yeah, I don't even think I told my parents that I was going, and then I just went. So, but it was fine. I was safe. It was great. To go to a national park and just be able to experience it, and not even a national park, but just the outdoors and really be by yourself and take it all in was that's a great experience in of itself. Will I be hiking Delaware Park? That must be from my mother because Delaware Park is in my hometown. What unexpected? Okay, and then was it expensive to get to American Samoa? So yeah, it was, but it was really the most expensive part was the airfare. A strategy for that is to get the Hawaiian Airlines credit card. So you can have points for that. There is potentially a companion pass that might come along with it. And then one thing that I did to like justify such a large purchase, like I was doing it regardless because I needed to get to that park, but the fact that I could do the multi-city in like stopover in Honolulu was a little bit more of a justification for it. Do I think that any park is overrated and not worth rushing to? I don't think that the parks are overrated, but I think that some parks may offer more or better experiences than others. So, Petrified Forest in Arizona was very neat because the trees are petrified, and to me, they're like rocks. And that was really cool to see, but it was very tiny, and they don't. I guess I would just say that some parks require more time. And so just to do your research to see how much time you should spend in each area and dedicate to each area. So yeah, I think that those are all of the questions, unless there have come up in the chat. But it was so great. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully you enjoyed the experiences in the lesser known parks, and hopefully once Corona is all said and done, hopefully sooner rather than later, you will also go and find your park. So, cool.
Thanks, Krista. Good job.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. See you.
Bye.
Great job, Krista.
Thank you.
Well done,
Thank
Krista.
you.
Thank you.
Great job, Krista.
Presentation.
Very good. You should be a tour director.
Oh,
The ranger program.
That's great.
Yes,
Thank you, Krista.
that's right. Be a park ranger, Krista. That'd be awesome.
Rent a ranger. Rent a ranger.
Yeah. Go find you some picnic baskets.
Oh, this one is so cute.
Oh my gosh. Angelique, hi, kitty.
Where's the raccoon at?
Oh, there's another kitty.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
Good job, tent mate.
Close this
Oh,
chat.
yeah.
Did good, Krista.
Thank you.
Okay.
You done?
Krista?
Thank you.
Yes.
You done?
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Krista.
Bye.
Bye. Hope to see
Bye.
you guys soon.
Yes, for sure.
Yes, Dad.
Get on the trails.
When are the itineraries going to be for sale?
That's a great question. Hopefully,
That would be cool.
yeah. I at this point am very happy to share my knowledge with anyone who is interested in it, and I have all of my itineraries that I make. My dad can say that there was an entire binder for Alaska.
Oh my God.
I like to really maximize every hour of the trip and make sure I get my time worth.
I have them all saved on my computer, Krista, all the ones you sent me.
Thank
They're
you.
all saved.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Cambria. Did you see the bears?
She liked the bear the best.
Okay, good. I added more just for them.
And for me.
The bears.
Yep.